another crisis in the classroom follow-up report. We continue to go in-depth on a controversial update to the Ballston Spa Central School District's gender identity policy. Tonight, we have a closer look at how the policy could bring changes to sports there. And CBS 6's JT Fetch has been looking into the policy changes and the division that it's causing. JT, this debate goes far beyond the local level.
Yeah, it really does, Ann. The issue of gender identity in sports was thrust into the national spotlight earlier this year with UPenn swimmer Leah Thomas becoming the first transgender Division I athlete to win an NCAA title. Now, as we've been reporting, that controversy is now at the K-12 level and in our own backyard.
But what about my daughter? What about what she's concerned about?
50 years of women athletics, right? And you want nobody cares.
Tempers flaring last week at the Ballston Spa Central School District's board meeting as members adopted an updated gender identity policy. Among other changes, it allows transgender or gender nonconforming students to use restrooms and locker rooms corresponding to the student's gender identity. With phys ed, sports, and intramurals, those students can participate in a manner consistent with their gender identity. That extends to the dress code and team uniforms. While some are in support, many at the meeting were against it.
You know, Title IX has always been based on ensuring equality and fairness based on biological sex.
Erika Sanzi is the outreach director at the national grassroots organization Parents Defending Education. She says across the country, policy changes like the one in Ballston Spa threaten the progress made by Title IX. Passed 50 years ago, the civil rights law prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives funding from the federal government. But Sanzi says changes proposed by the Biden administration could damage that legacy.
Federal law would now take away the 50 years of having rights to single-sex spaces and to sports that were just for girls and women so that they would have a fair shot at competition.
What we found is that more than 60% of Americans feel that athletes should only be permitted to play on a sports team that reflects their gender at birth.
Mary Griffith is helping to unpack data from a Marist poll on Title IX. Griffith says the poll found both the majority of men and women think athletes should play the sport corresponding to their gender at birth. And the real divide comes when it's broken down by age.
What we see is that the youngest members of American society are more willing to accept athletes playing on sports teams that reflect their current gender identities.
Griffith says this opinion of Gen Z and millennials could lead to a future evolution on policies like the change adopted by Ballston Spa. Sanzi and her organization, however, have data of their own that shows people aren't aware of a point Parents Defending Education is trying to make. They say the changes proposed by the White House would make all of Title IX about gender identity.
Our polling showed that 81% of voters were still not aware of this rewrite by the Biden administration.
Griffith says the future of the now 50-year impact of Title IX is still up in the air when it comes to gender identity in athletics, as the debate continues across the country and in Ballston Spa.
It really is a matter of keeping tabs on the conversation, see how it changes, and see where the debate goes.
The Marist poll also showed a definitive partisan divide. A majority of Democrats, 56%, think trans athletes should be able to play on teams matching their gender identity. But 92% of Republicans think these athletes should only play on sports teams matching their birth gender. We'll have a link to the full poll, our previous reporting on Ballston Spa's policy change, and the district's response to the pushback from parents, all on CBS6Albany.com.